morning, everyone. I'm Michael Millman, Communications Director at PainBC, and I'm very happy to welcome you to the Mindfulness Meditation for Chronic Pain webinar series. This webinar series is produced in partnership with the Canadian Institute for the Relief of Pain and Disability, PainBC, and Langara College. Before we begin, I'd like to tell you a little bit about PainBC. PainBC began as a grassroots movement led by an interdisciplinary group of pain experts that were frustrated by the lack of resources available to their patients. It then grew into a multifaceted province-wide initiative that incorporated as a nonprofit society in 2008. PainBC recognizes that nothing affects our well-being more than pain, whether it's someone living with a chronic condition like arthritis, heart disease, or cancer, or it's someone suffering with an illness like fibromyalgia or complex regional pain syndrome, or recovering from injury or surgery. Persistent pain is the common element with the single greatest impact on quality of life. So at PainBC, we envision an inclusive society where people in pain are able to live, work, play, and relate with confidence and hope. And at PainBC, we've been working to reduce the burden of pain through engagement, education, advocacy, and knowledge translation. And our mission concentrates on three strategies for change. The first is by educating, promoting skill development, and building hope and confidence for people in pain, and this our participation in this webinar series is part of that. The second is providing healthcare providers with the education, tools, and skills to better manage and assess their patients' pain. And finally, we're involved in facilitating the development of innovation and improvements in the healthcare system. So for more information on PainBC, you can visit our website at www.painbc.ca. And it's now my pleasure to hand things over to Tanya Hyde, Project Manager at the Canadian Institute for the Relief of Pain and Disability, who will tell you a little bit about CIRPD and introduce our presenter. Thank you.
And Tanya, I believe your phone is on mute.
Oh, goodness. That's both of us. Anyways, thank you very much, Michael, for that introduction, and thank you, everyone, for being here today. We're very happy to be co-hosting this with PainBC as well as Langara College. The series should prove to be a really great addition to the webinar series that we've been doing on chronic pain. The Canadian Institute for the Relief of Pain and Disability, CIRPD for short, has been focused on creating and translating research-based evidence resources in the area of chronic pain and disability for over 25 years. Our focus is on prevention and reduction of chronic pain-related suffering, and disability by creating and sharing evidence-based resources and information. We focus on bringing education and resources to people with pain, but also to employers, health professionals, and family members of people with pain. We've been hosting educational webinars for the last 2 years, and we have engaged researchers, pain professionals, and disability management professionals to share current research and practical skills around pain management and workplace health and wellness. And for more information or to view any of our past recorded webinars, you can go to www.cirpd.org. And I would like to do a quick introduction for our speaker today. Linda Turner is the Program Manager of Health and Human Services at Langara College in the Continuing Studies Department. She studied with John Kabat-Zinn to learn how to teach Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction, MBSR for short, and she received her MBSR teacher certification from the University of Massachusetts Medical School, Center for Mindfulness in Medicine, Healthcare, and Society. She has taught the 8-week MBSR program for over the past 10 years to patients in pain, members of the general public. This course is offered through Langara Continuing Studies at least twice per year, and she'll provide a little more information about that course as well. And I will hand it over to...
Thank you very much, Tanya. I am very excited to have the opportunity to talk about mindfulness-based stress reduction, as I have been working with it for many years now, and I do find it's helpful in the management of chronic pain. I would like to introduce the topic by indicating that this is not the full program. This is a 5-week introduction to the program, and we will be sending out resources for other provinces and for this province as to where to access the full program. I do have a course starting tonight at Langara College if anyone is interested, and the resources will be emailed out to you. I'm going to begin by talking a little bit. We've already done the introductions, and we're going to talk a little bit about what the research indicates related to mindfulness-based stress reduction and pain. And we're going to have some questions. So at the end of the talk, I would like to ask people to email their questions in, and we will address those questions next week when we begin. So this is an iceberg, which is basically a slide showing the tiny part sticking out of the water and this great huge part underneath the water. And what happens with our mind is very similar, is that this little tiny part that sticks out of the top is what we are aware of. This vast amount of ice below the surface is what we tend not to be aware of. And these things are extremely important to bring awareness to, because if we don't know what our thoughts are, then we have no idea how we are influencing our lives. So the mindfulness is very much about investigating what these thoughts are, what they look like, and what we say to ourselves on a daily basis. It turns out to be exceedingly important in the management of pain. This is a slide, and it is basically a cartoon depiction of how pain is experienced. So if you start at number 1, for example, if you had surgery on your finger, and the pain impulse would travel along the peripheral nerve all the way up on number 2, and would go to number 3 in the dorsal horn of the spinal cord, where it would synapse, and then go up to the brain, circulate around the brain, and be perceived as pain or not. And so it turns out that there are multiple things that influence this transmission of pain through the body. It's not a simple process as it used to be thought. It's very, very complicated. And when we are dealing with chronic pain, each portion of this transmission pathway is exceedingly important to modifying the pain experience. So basically, when the chronic pain is allowed to continue without any intervention whatsoever, sometimes the actual pain transmission track can get broken, and it almost gets stuck in a groove, so that that whole pain pathway becomes a pain memory, and it's persistent, and it's out of proportion entirely to the actual injury or the beginning stimulus that caused the pain track to be activated. So this is where we can make a huge difference by working with things like mindfulness and looking at what our thoughts are. So we have in our brain an actual track that comes down from the cerebral cortex, which is called the descending inhibitory pathway. And it turns out this pathway is exceedingly powerful. It can modify pain in an amazing way. It can actually take away the perception of pain, which is quite remarkable. So it comes down the spinal cord, and it actually prevents the perception of having pain. These are pictures of people in another country running across hot coals, and it turns out that they are so proud to be participating in this ceremony that they don't have blisters on their feet at the end of the exercise, and they actually don't feel any pain. And similarly, in this same kind of a ceremony, I believe it's in Thailand, they have been honored by their people to be representing the beginning of a new crop year. And they have actual needles inserted into their bodies, and as you can see, it's sticking out of part of their flesh. And there's no perception of pain because they are in an altered state where they are feeling so proud of what they are doing that there's no perception of pain and there's no bleeding. So it's quite remarkable that these men are experiencing no pain or discomfort, but they are in a state of mind where they don't feel anything. And so we also have this ability to enter into these altered states where we feel differently. Again, the picture of the message coming from the cerebral cortex down into the dorsal horn of the spinal cord and actually preventing the perception of pain. These kinds of abilities take practice, and they take quite a bit of self-work, of looking within ourselves to see what is going on in our own mind and body. And so it takes a lot of courage, I must say, to look at some of the things that we actually do say to ourselves. Mindfulness-based stress reduction is an 8-week program developed at the University of Massachusetts in about 1979, and it runs for 8 weeks. It's 2 to 2.5 hours per week, and then a 1 full day of like a silent retreat, somewhat like if you went to a meditation retreat, to introduce people to the practice of mindfulness meditation. The emphasis in this program is that it's educational and not therapeutic, and it works mostly with what is right with you as opposed to what is wrong with you. So it capitalizes on the resources that we already have and helps us to investigate where we can make a difference in our own lives by looking within. Mindfulness-based stress reduction in the beginning was thought to be somewhat radical because it was introducing meditation, which is normally done in monasteries up on a hill, into the mainstream of healthcare. And in addition, there was a component that introduced yoga and yoga movement. And so in the beginning, it was not well received. It took a while. But now, due to the growth of the research in this area, it's offered at more than 300 medical centers in the U.S. and around the world. And there's now 30-plus years of research in the area. And it has now its own journal named after mindfulness, where many of the studies are published. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of this research. The categories of mindfulness are Vipassana, as I mentioned, which began originating in the ancient Buddhist temples over 2 millennia ago. Mindfulness-based stress reduction, which was introduced by Jon Kabat-Zinn through the University of Massachusetts. There's a program which is called Mindfulness-Based Cognitive Therapy, which was introduced through the University of Toronto by Dr. Siegel. And then there is the Mindfulness-Based Eating, which came from the University of Massachusetts. Those are all versions of the same type of a program using different portions of the intervention throughout. Mindfulness in the research. So this is an exemplary study which was done in Boston by Richard Davidson and Jon Kabat-Zinn. Basically, they offered the mindfulness-based stress reduction program to one group of employees from a company and not to another. And what they found was quite remarkable, is that they found that it was altering the actual physiology in the body, which when a mind intervention can start to alter the physiology, makes a huge difference in the credibility of the technique. So this is the mean trait anxiety. So the one group in time 2, so the green group were the people who had the intervention. They demonstrated a reduction in their trait anxiety, which is a pretty big component of experience of anxiety. And this was the most remarkable part of that study, is that people in the experimental group received a vaccination for a flu, and both groups received this vaccination, and in the group who had the mindfulness-based stress reduction intervention, they had an significant increase in the antibodies in the bloodstream. So huge difference it made in the physiology, so that it actually was influencing the immune system. So some of the research that has come out lately from the University of Toronto is that mindfulness-based stress reduction is as effective as antidepressants in preventing relapse from in a depressive person. So pretty huge is that the actual intervention of mindfulness can actually prevent relapse of depression just as well as an antidepressant can. So the research over the years is growing astronomically. So it started very, very slow in the late 70s, and now it's hugely mushroomed into this huge body of research, which now demonstrates changes in the physiology as well as in the mind body. So huge, huge research and evidence supporting the use of this type of technique. These are some of the more recent studies that I found related to mindfulness and to pain. Is from Zedin, Martucci, Kraft, Gordon, 2011. Meditation reduced all subjects' pain intensity by 11 to 70%, and it reduced all subjects' unpleasantness rating by 20 to 93%, and the meditation-related relief was directly related to the cognitive processing about the pain. So the pain transmission pathway that we looked at previously indicated that some of the actual pathway is in the cortex of the brain and can be influenced by our thoughts and our thought patterns. So if we are able to look at our thoughts and our thought patterns, we can influence how the pain is perceived. In the limbic system, it's a very primitive portion of our brain, and it contains a portion called the amygdala and the thalamus, and those portions of the brain are responsible for our emotional responses, so things like anxiety and things that would make us feel emotional. These portions of the brain is where they find actual physical changes in the density of that tissue in the body as a result of mindfulness. So this is just a picture of the brain, and if you can see the little red dot, that's kind of the location of the amygdala, and the actual density of that tissue changes as a result of mindfulness practice. And after only 8 weeks, you can change the density of those portions of the brain. Again, altering the pain transmission pathway, sending messages down from the cortex to the dorsal horn of the spinal cord and changing the perception of pain. This is another slide where we have portions of the brain that have changed as a result of mindfulness meditation and the actual perception of pain. So one group was offered meditation as an intervention and one group was not. The group at the top was the control group, so they had no meditation intervention, and the areas of the brain that are lit up as a result of a painful stimulus are different in the group who had the meditation intervention and the group that did not. So just a different firing pattern, so that's quite powerful in modifying the perception if your entire brain reflects that intervention. There's a portion of the brain, it's got a big long name, it's called the thalamic reticular nucleus, and it facilitates the filtering between the front of the brain, between the frontal cortexes, and it's called a GABAergic structure. So it basically operates as a gatekeeper between the thalamus and the cortex, so between this emotional generator in the brain and the cortex. And all the feedback connections operate through this thalamic reticular nucleus. And so meditation-induced activation of the limbic thalamic gating mechanism actually alters the ascending information that goes up the spinal cord, so that when one meditates, it actually alters the physical structure in the brain, and it alters the transmission from the actual source of the pain up the dorsal horn of the spinal cord to the brain, and it becomes altered and changed by different activation in the brain. So what is thought from the research is that the limbic system is responsible for helping the mindfulness-based stress reduction to decrease pain, and it actually reduces the ascending stimuli from the source of the pain, and it does this through blocking the transmission in the brain and through a change in the cognitive processing of pain. So through a change in what we think about the pain and what we say to ourselves related to the pain. So that is how it is thought to alter the painful stimuli. Again, looking back at our cartoon transmission pathway, it blocks it along that route and actually alters the actual transmission of pain. And so the other part of the modification is of mindfulness and pain is that these body-focused attentional practices, so when we actually focus on looking within our body, looking within our thought, and within our body-mind, we actually alter the brain waves and the rhythms that are thought to play a key role in regulating the sensory input to the brain, to the neocortex. So that if we actually spend present moment breathing, sinking into our body, noticing what's going on in our body, noticing what's going on in our brain, we stabilize the body-mind, and that actually alters the brain waves and thereby alters the actual pathway through the brain. So it's quite powerful. Quite powerful, this very simple act of attending to what is going on in the present moment. And so this is just a picture of those brain waves that are altering the actual transmission pathway. The cognitive processing of pain is another portion of it. And we mentioned that the meditation alters the perception by 11 to 70%. And what that research found is that the unpleasantness rating associated with the pain and the perception of pain was altered. And this was thought to be entirely due to the cognitive processing about the pain. So this is a bit of a difficult thing to get in touch with when we're actually suffering from pain or discomfort, is actually to take a deep breath, sink into the body, and notice what we say to ourselves about the pain. And it takes quite a lot of courage because it's really, really hard to look at what you yourself are saying to yourself. So it takes a lot of interest, gentle interest in what it is that we do in our lives. I'm going to talk a little bit now about this awareness process, is that it seems that mindfulness is almost a miracle drug when it's related to pain, is that it can make a huge, huge difference. But it's thought to be both simple and really, really very hard, because it's really very difficult to make our mind stay in one place for any length of time. The mind has a tendency to fly out and off and into another subject very, very quickly. And so the actual practice of awareness is complicated and requires quite a bit of patience with ourselves. So the awareness that we can experience is continuous. The triangle of awareness is looking within the body sensations, the thoughts, and our emotions. We don't always bring attention to our awareness, so that much of our day we can be on automatic pilot. So for example, you might find yourself driving from one place to another and actually forgetting how you got there, or going all day without eating, or coming home at the end of the day and having your shoulders up around your neck and you have a really bad headache, but you didn't notice the very first beginning of the fact that your shoulders were tightening. And so that is what we're talking about when it comes to awareness of the attention we're bringing to our body-mind. The mindfulness begins with attention. John Kabat-Zinn defines mindfulness as attention that is intentional, moment to moment, and non-judgmental. So we are noticing, and we are in each moment as it occurs, and we are non-judgmental towards ourselves. So we are not beating ourselves up for not staying in the present moment. We are just looking at whatever is with kind of an amusement to see what goes on in my mind and body at this point in time. What is happening? And again, I want to emphasize that this can be difficult when you're uncomfortable. And so it requires a special focus on being gentle with yourself, to look within it. So it's paying attention on purpose in a particular way. And the non-judgmental attention to the present moment experience is what mindfulness meditation is. That's all that it is. And it actually is remarkably different than what many people think about meditation. Many people have said to me is that they can't meditate because their mind is too busy and too hard to clear the mind. So I want to emphasize that mindfulness meditation is not about clearing the mind at all. It's about looking to see whatever is. Whatever is just fine. Even if it's a lot of angry, negative thoughts, it's okay to notice that. And it's not only okay, it's important to notice those thoughts. So it's just a gentle looking within, see what is going on in the body-mind. So it's interwoven aspects of a cyclic kind of a process, so that there's intention, attention, and then an attitude towards it. What kind of an attitude or emotion comes up as a result of this practice? So the attention is observing the moment-to-moment experience, and it helps us to actually notice what is and to attend to the contents of what is our consciousness moment by moment. I think at this point in time I'd like to do about a 3-minute exercise. If I could ask you to participate in this, I'm going to ask you to sit in your chair and to uncross your legs and to take a deep breath all the way down to the bottom of your lungs. And continuing to breathe deeply and slowly and evenly. I'd like to invite you to turn your mind's eye inside of the body and to see what's going on in that body of yours. See if you can feel your feet on the floor, bringing the awareness into the feet. Continuing to breathe deeply and slowly and evenly. Moving the awareness from the feet to the legs. To the behind. See if you can feel the pressure of the chair underneath your behind. To the actual lower body, stomach. Is the stomach empty? Is it full? To the heart, your heart beating. To the neck and the shoulders. Are they tight? To the jaw. To the face. And to the brain, to the head. the mind? What are the thoughts about right now? Noticing what the thoughts are about. And then, if you've closed your eyes, just opening them again and just noticing for a second, what did you notice in there that you didn't know about? Did you notice that there was any tension or discomfort? Or anything that started early on this morning that you've been rushing to get through? Just sinking into the body-mind and seeing what's going on in there. And that is what the attention and the awareness is about. Just noticing whatever is, with no particular way of being, just noticing. Okay, so basically that exercise was to look within the body and just notice whatever is. So if there's tension in the body, then there's tension, and that's okay, because the first step in the process is bringing awareness to whatever is. So that's all that the mindfulness meditation is, to bring awareness to the situation. And then for the courses, or for the process of the course, people are invited to practice these attitudes for the duration of the 8 weeks. So just practice them as kind of an experiment. So acceptance with oneself and whatever is going on, non-judging, openness, a curiosity, a trust that things will unfold as they should, a kindness, and the kindness particularly with oneself, kindness particularly towards oneself, a gentle kindness, a non-striving, patience, letting go, and a gentleness. And again, the gentleness and the kindness are the most important aspects of the process. So what happens through the mindfulness is a shift in perspective, basically. So when we can actually see the thing itself, instead of what our thoughts are about it, we can actually see when we're paying attention with an acceptance and an openness to what we're experiencing, what our experience is. And then through this, there's actually a shift in the perspective. And so I'm going to give you a for example, is that if I have something going on in my life and I'm very angry at it, and I have a conversation within my mind which is angry with whatever is going on, that actual dialogue in my brain tends to change the actual perception of whatever is going on. And many times what seems to emerge when we're really gentle and kind and honest with ourselves is that we actually don't see the thing itself. We see our story about the thing. And so sometimes in long-term marriages, for example, we have a story about our spouse, and that's what we believe that spouse to be. And we actually don't see that person in front of us anymore. And so the mindfulness is very much about coming into beginner's eyes, coming into beginner's eyes and seeing the thing through a fresh perspective, seeing the thing as though a newborn baby would look at the thing, and actually noticing what is. And so that process of stabilizing the body-mind helps us to actually reconnect with what is going on in the body-mind. So this shift in perspective. And through that, what happens is basically a rotation of the consciousness, is that we identify with the contents of consciousness and are able to see more clearly through objectivity and clarity. So rather than being immersed in the drama of our story, we are able to stand back and witness this. And so, as I mentioned previously, it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of gentleness with oneself to stand back and actually look and see what we do to ourselves or how we behave in certain situations. And so, for example, for me is if I'm standing in a lineup in a store and I'm not in a rush, I can stand there and it's not a problem. But when I'm in a rush, I start to tighten and I get agitated and I get really annoyed, and then I make up stories about the people around me. And by the end of it all, I'm really in a completely bad state. And so if I'm honest with myself, I can notice that process starting to happen. So that requires quite a bit of gentleness with oneself, because sometimes we really don't want to see ourselves like that. So it takes courage. So what Daniel Goleman says is that the phenomena contemplated are distinct from the mind contemplating them. So there's quite a difference between those two states, is that our mind has a story, and we often have the same stories that we tell ourselves, and these may have been going on all of our lives unless we stop to look at some of them. So through this process, often we can disidentify with the contents of consciousness. So when we're talking about pain, if we are able to re-perceive and make my pain or my depression more of an object, and so if we're actually able to stand back and look at it, we realize that if I can see it, I must be more than it. So it is not me. It actually is something that I can look at from the outside. The depression is not me. The thought is not me. These are simply thoughts that are going through my consciousness at this point in time. And so that is what the practice of mindfulness is stepping back and looking honestly and gently at what it is we have going on in our body-mind. The whole 8-week course is geared towards helping us practice small steps to come to this place where we can start to look at this awareness and consciousness and awareness of the body-mind. So these are some of the resources that exist related to mindfulness in British Columbia, and as I mentioned, Tanya and Michael will be sending out more resources for other provinces, but this is one of the networks in British Columbia is MBSR BC, where you'll find several instructors, and then of course the Center for Mindfulness in Medicine, Healthcare and Society in Worcester, Massachusetts. And the lessons from clinical practice, I'd like to just spend a moment talking about some of the things that happen in clinical practice when we're working with mindfulness, and I want to make sure that all of our audience is really very safe when they are practicing any of the techniques that we're going to recommend for you to practice. And so some of the things that happens is that trauma, if there's been trauma or if the pain is associated with trauma, the actual gentle process of looking within and noticing what is going on in the body-mind might activate that trauma, and it might throw a person back into the trauma situation. So for the purpose of this particular webinar, I would like to introduce you to another very short technique, and it's called the butterfly hug, and it is basically a simple technique developed to prevent someone from going into a full-blown trauma reaction. So if you are practicing the body scan or one of the meditation exercises during this program, I'd like you to remember this technique and return to it if that should happen. So this technique is really very simple, and all you have to do is breathe really deeply. So breathe all the way down to the bottom of your lungs, taking a deep breath in and staying with the breath, and put your arms around yourself so that you're kind of crossing your arms, and gently tap one side and the other. Continuing to breathe deeply and slowly and evenly, and making sure the tapping is very slow, so that you're tapping one side and the other, and in your mind saying to yourself, I am safe, I am here now, I am safe, I am here now. And if you like, you can also move your feet, so as though you were moving, so tapping your feet up and down, so bringing the toe up of one foot and the heel down of the other, and reversing it. So bringing the toe up of the other foot and the heel down of the other foot. So almost like you're walking. So it's kind of an exercise to bring you back to the present moment and keep you safe if there's any trauma that has precipitated the pain. And then one of the other things that often happens in clinical practice is that it's pretty frustrating trying to get where we're trying to get to in this practice. Looking with a gentle kindness at whatever is going on in our mind and body, and sometimes people just get really frustrated because it's not a quick process. It's not fast. It takes a while to be able to discover what it takes a while to look within, and it takes a lot of work and courage to actually be honest with ourselves. So those are the two things that have come up in clinical practice that I'm aware of. And then these are some of the references that are related to this particular presentation. And I think they'll be available on your screen. This is a quote from William James, who says that compared to what we ought to be, we are only half awake. And then this one is one of my favorite ones. It's mindful or mindful. So are we present with the moment, or are we on automatic pilot with our mind flying through with millions and millions of things so that we aren't aware of any one of them? And when we aren't aware of any one of them, we don't know how we're being pulled or where it's taking us in our mind and body. So for this week, what I'd like to invite you to do is to, if you're going to stay with us for the entire 5-week period and experience the introduction to mindfulness, I'd like to ask you to practice the body scan. And the body scan is available online. I think Michael and Tanya will be mailing that to you. And basically, it's about a half an hour looking within the body. So what I want to emphasize with this particular technique is that it is not about relaxing necessarily. It is not about relaxing. It is just about looking to see whatever is. So if the mind is busy, that's okay. And where the important part comes in this practice is to notice what the mind has to say during this time that you're practicing. If you intend to practice and you don't get around to practicing, then noticing, is that something that happens regularly in my life? Do I intend to do something and then I don't do it because I'm so busy, I don't make the time for myself? So it's just about being very, very interested and curious about what it is that we do in our own body-mind. And basically, you're the only person who can answer that question. No one else can. It's only what goes on in one's individual body-mind. There's no standard at all. It's just whatever is going on for you. And so there's no right, there's no wrong, there's no particular place that you're needing to get to. It's just noticing, bringing awareness to. And so I think I'm going to pass the screen over to Michael to wrap up the program. And I just want to add one more thing, is that if you have questions or if things arise during the practice of the body scan, if you could email them in, and then we would address them next session at the very beginning. So thank you very much for your time.
And Michael, you're mute.
Yes, I was muted again. Thank you so much, Linda. On behalf of Pain BC and the Canadian Institute for the Relief of Pain and Disability, I want to thank you so much for sharing this overview of mindfulness meditation for chronic pain. If you haven't already done so, our attendees, please register for the rest of the series. After this, actually in 10 minutes from now, you'll all be receiving an email that will contain links to register for the rest of the series, as well as links to the body scan and other resources that you'll need for the rest of the session. So watch out for that email that should arrive in your inbox in about 10 minutes. I'm really looking forward to hearing what Linda has to say next week on practicing awareness and where the mind goes. So as Linda mentioned, if you have any questions at all, any feedback about how your meditation practice is going between now and the next session, please send them to us at communications@painbc, communications@painbc.ca. Also, for the practitioners in the audience, I wanted to remind people that Pain BC's annual pain management conference is happening November 2nd in Burnaby, BC, and the province's leading clinical experts are going to assemble and share their knowledge about the latest developments and cutting-edge research on pain and the brain. Sessions are going to focus on practical and applied learning for healthcare practitioners from all disciplines. So if you're a nurse, a RMT, a counselor, a physician, physio, occupational therapist, anybody who treats people with chronic pain, this would be very relevant to your practices. So there'll be a link to register for that conference also coming in the email in about 9 or 10 minutes from now. So on behalf of the Canadian Institute for the Relief of Pain and Disability, Pain BC, and Langara College, I want to thank you so much for attending, and we'll see you all again same time next week. Have a great week.